Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cine Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you're joining us live, super happy to have you. If at any point during the show you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. I'll do my best to kind of keep an eye on it, see if we can get a conversation started. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really, really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people finding the channel. So if you have found this channel, why not subscribe? We're trying to grow this community and kind of make this a safe space for cinephiles and people interested in these kinds of things. If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes in the description so you can kind of jump around at your leisure. We stream this show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and same deal as before. Don't forget to like, and if you do nothing else, do not forget to subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past week. Total domestic box office was a little over 100 million, which is only a 3% drop, right? We're seeing it really holding week after week after week. It's not necessarily gangbuster numbers, but the big takeaway, and I've been saying this week after week as well, that this is really, January really is the graveyard of the box office season. So really it's just the opportunity for all the films that opened in November, but especially December, to just keep making money. Because people want to go to the movies, right? But, if the options in front of them are less than desirable, they're gonna just keep throwing money at these movies that have been at the top week after week. So the biggest new movie, the only new movie to make it into the top 10 this week was Flight Risk. This was a Mel Gibson movie starring Mark Wahlberg. Essentially, they're transferring Topher Grace, who I guess is like a key witness for some kind of crime trial. And Mark Wahlberg is like secretly posing as like the helicopter pilot, but he's actually there to kill Topher Grace. So he doesn't, talk. He doesn't squeal on the other, his co-conspirators and whatever the crime is, right? Did not open super big, but it kind of fell right where people thought it was gonna. It opened around 11.5 million. I had projected it to make around 9 to 15 with a target of 12 million. So, not great. It did at least meet the projections, right? That you don't always see that. At least we haven't necessarily seen that week in the past couple of weeks. But again, the big concern is, it's made a little over 12 million worldwide, but off of a $25 million budget. So it's not a particularly expensive movie, but again, it just isn't bringing in the money that they would hope for. So as of right now, it's in the red. Now, that being said, plenty of things are in the red their first weekend and then eventually, slowly over time make back their budget. But this has not been getting particularly good reviews either. Maybe it kind of scratches that itch of like, it feels very dated in terms of like the concept. Like it feels like you would see something like this in the 90s. So that might actually be a good in its favor. Because the people who are most going to the movies right now are older people and younger people. Like if you're like 35 to 55, you're not really going to the movies that much. It's really Gen Z and boomers. And then Gen X and millennials are kind of in this weird gray zone. So maybe it'll appeal to people. Again, it feels like a film kind of from a different era. But again, like I said, the main, takeaway from this week is just reinforcing this idea that all of these movies that came out, November and December are just still dominating. So at number one, still number one in its sixth frame. It didn't open at number one, I don't believe so. But it's kind of found its way up to the top. Really interestingly, is Mufasa: The Lion King. It brought in around 14.6 million, only a 10% drop from the previous week. Of course, these numbers include MLK Day, so that also probably helps with this total weekly box office only being a 3% drop, kind of holding down the fort. Look at the legs on this thing. A 6 flat. So if you're new to the channel, basically the legs formula is essentially taking the total domestic box office for its entire run and then dividing it by its biggest weekend. Usually that's its opening weekend, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, right? So if it opens smaller and then opens in more theaters later, that could then be the metric, right? This is just, it's a measure of how well is it kind of been making money week after week, as opposed to something that opens really big and then due to poor word of mouth or just bad advertising, it just kind of like just disappears, right? So what this number shows us is that it has been very sustainable. It's brought in almost $221 million domestically, 627-ish million worldwide. Not an amazing percent return. It was made for like $200 million. But again, considering how like mediocre the movie, at least the perception of it is, I saw it and I thought it was fine. I thought it was at least a net positive. But it's not this cultural phenomenon by any stretch of the imagination. But the fact it's still here in the top 10, doing as well as it is at number 1, again, I feel like it's been at number 1 for at least 3 weeks. I think speaks to both. I've talked about this many times before. I think it really helps the Lin-Manuel Miranda score. The fact that one of the songs was kind of turned into a semi-meme helps it. You know what I mean? Like, all publicity is good publicity. So I think it speaks to that. But again, it also speaks to there's not a lot of options, right? And the one that it was kind of flipping around with was Sonic the Hedgehog 3. So interestingly, this has dropped a little bit. It's dropped 2 places from 2nd to 4th. Also in its 6th frame, so both of these they both opened the Friday before Christmas, and they're still here, but Sonic is tumbling a little bit more, right? So Sonic has made more domestically, but that lead is being shrunk every week. Before I was like, oh, well, there's like a pretty big gap domestically, but it's only about 5 million more now that I'm looking at it. And it's only made maybe a little bit more than 2/3 of Mufasa's worldwide box office. So, though that being said, it is a little bit better percent return because it was cheaper to make. I've talked about this before. I think you could attribute Mufasa doing better internationally just because it's a little bit more basic. It's kind of a classic hero's journey. Speaks to fundamental the human condition, if you will, even though they're animals. Where Sonic 3 feels a lot more contextual to American pop culture. So it makes sense that would be trailing behind a little bit, though it is interesting considering Sonic is a international character, right? He is a Japanese character. So I'd be interested to see what the numbers are like in Japan. Part of me feels like maybe the Japanese wouldn't even like this movie because again, it's essentially an American film in terms of its style, its tone, its objectives, its humor, and I think that explains why it's kind of trailing Mufasa internationally. Still in the because Sonic dropped 2 places, that means that some two films have now taken 2nd and 3rd place. So jumping a spot from 3rd to now 2nd, we have One of Them Days in its 2nd frame, bringing a little over 13 million. This is kind of the comedy with Keke Palmer and SZA. I was gonna go see it, I think, this week, but it was just too cold. It's in New York City. I don't know where my listeners are, so feel free to drop in the chat where you're watching from. But in New York City, it sucks because if I was living in the suburbs, even if it was ass cold, I could at least just go in my car and drive to a movie theater. So the amount of time I'm outside is only maybe like 5 minutes. Whereas in New York City, even if it's only a 20-minute commute from door to door from my apartment to the movie theater, it's mostly outdoors. You're walking to the subway. If it's in Queens, like I live by the 7 train, which is an above ground train. So that's like waiting on the platform, above ground, cold wind chill. So it's gotten to a point where depending on how cold it is, it's like, I'm not gonna go. I'm gonna cancel I'm gonna reschedule just because I owe it to myself. I don't owe any of you anything. That's not really true. So this is, I was gonna go see this. It did get a jump, right? It had a 15% jump. And so far now, it's made around 25 million, a little more than that. That's both its domestic and worldwide numbers. And it was only made off of $14 million. So this is, I think, one that, if I'm not mistaken, did not, was still maybe in the partial red last week. or at the very least still like in this yellow zone. So it's, you know, it's on its way, I think, to double that budget. Ideally, you want to double the budget because the budget does not account for marketing and advertising. I see here in the comments, Lorenzo Fletcher Productions. He's watching from Ohio. He or she, I don't mean to presume. You know, I don't know your first name or anything, but super glad to have you know from Ohio. I'm sure it's even colder than it is here. But, you know, again, most likely, unless you're living in like a major city in Ohio, you're probably driving wherever you're going. Also, Lorenzo, I did see your comment, but I'll save your comment for when I tackle that story, your other comment. Moving on here, we have Moana 2. Now it's 9th frame, so it's been in the top 10 for 2 months now. Actually jumped a spot, right? So it jumped from 6th to 5th place, coming back into the top 10, bringing just a little over $7 million. Again, only a 7% drop. So it is, again, not holding as well as Mufasa, right? Because most of this money that it made, you know, its total domestic is around $450 million. I think it opened at like 200 something, right? So this is still pretty good, sustainable performance, but you know, it is still kind of hindered by the fact that it opened so big and kind of has dropped steadily. Again, because the reaction to the movie has been kind of like an unenthusiastic thud, right? Though, again, it just speaks to the current climate of movies that this thing made over $1 billion worldwide, which is insane. Just insane if for no other reason, again, that it seems to generally be considered a mediocre movie. I did not go see this just because, again, I do not have the time to go see everything as much as I want to. And then when I heard it wasn't very good, I was just like, I'm not going to waste my time with this. But again, I think it's at least the number 3rd highest grossing movie from 2024. So the top 3 movies from 2024 were all Disney movies. And again, like I've said, they will take the wrong lessons from this and go, oh, we need to stop making all this original crap. We just need to make more sequels and spin-offs to the properties that people already seem to care about. Just a couple other notes here. In its second week, we have dropping from 5th to 6th place, swapping with Moana, was Wolfman. Pretty sizable drop, though it's only sizable compared to the rest of the top 10. But this is like a pretty standard, I feel like, second week drop. You only brought in a little under 7 million. This has also not been getting particularly good reviews. Though it has at least crossed the initial budget threshold. It's made around $27.5 million worldwide, off of a $25 million budget. So it still has a long way to go. And I'm not super hopeful about this one. Couple other notes here, though. Wicked is still in the top 10. Very happy about this. It's in its 10th frame now, holding its 9th place spot, brought in a little over $4 million. Again, this is such a great, I'm an unabashed Wicked supporter. I feel like it's almost like we've turned on it, as we do every year with the Oscar frontrunner. We all turn on it, and then whatever wasn't the frontrunner, didn't have the target on its back, kind of, assumes the position. But Wicked, it was phenomenal. And frankly, I'm surprised it's not going to get to $1 billion, which seems very unlikely at this point. When this thing came out, it just felt like it was everywhere. Though it has been holding really well, right? And even though it's not going to hit $1 billion, the fact that a nearly 3-hour musical, that isn't even the full musical, it's only the first part. The fact it's made this much, over 700 million worldwide, I think is a testament to the brand and in the quality of the movie. And the meminess of it, like the weird press tour with Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, that all constitutes a winning formula, right? Though the issue that I feel like companies don't realize is you can't manufacture that was not planned. That weird, bizarre press tour, that's just how they are, right? And again, we're also seeing here a complete unknown with a really strong legs right behind Mufasa. This did not open super big. And as you can see, the percent return is still not great, right? Because it's made $74 million, worldwide, it was made for $60 million. So, I think now that the Oscar nominations have come out, you're going to see some of these films get a little bit of a bump. And that's what, and you probably saw that with this week as well, but now you're really going to see some of these films that, are still in the top 10, maybe the top 20, that have been doing okay. They're going to either get in more theaters or more people are going to want to go see them, and you're going to see more ticket sales for those movies. Normally, though, Nosferatu did not really get much love from the Oscars, though it did get a little bit. It dropped from 7th to 10th place, though. This has been a surprise financial success. It's brought in, $160+ million worldwide off of a $50 million budget, which I still have yet to see Nosferatu, but I'm just so happy because I really like Robert Eggers as a filmmaker, and I was really nervous after how The Northman didn't do very well financially. I was really worried his career was about to stall. So this is kind of giving it a little new, like another little, a new lease on life, if you will. Okay, and looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, we have Dogman. This is like a spin-off of the Captain Underpants movies. I was a big Captain Underpants fan as a kid, but I don't remember Dogman at all. That might have been like a later addition. It's like another comic book that the characters in the book create. So this seems to be fun. I remember liking the Captain Underpants anime movie from when I was younger. But I don't remember this at all. So I kind of lost my train of thought, but I don't remember this at all. The trailers seem cute. It's not going to be like a smash by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm dubious if critics will like this movie, but I think it'll be kind of cute. It's projected to make around 21 to 30. I'm going to put a target around 26. Again, not very big, but for January, this will be the last January weekend, barely, because it'll just be Fridays the 31st, and then we'll move into February. And that's where you start to see, the shackles of the early box off, the early part of the box office year. You see those shackles undone. Just quickly before moving on, I see Viviana's comment. Are people turning on Wicked now? It's not so much turning on it, people saying they hate it, but I think the hype, it felt like the week after it opened, it felt like a cultural phenomenon, in a way that felt like, oh, this is going to sweep the Oscars. This is going to completely dominate everything. Whereas now it doesn't feel like that anymore. It's not that there's active negative. It just feels like the positive fervor has kind of dulled in a sense. And then we have Companion. This is a kind of a sci-fi rom-com, if you will. So basically the premise is so here's the letterbox blurb if you're interested. A billionaire's death sets off a chain of events for Iris and her friends during a weekend trip to his lakeside estate. I think she's meant to be like an android of some kind or like a robot. I don't really know much about this, but again, it's not tracking to open particularly big. It's only, I'm going to put it around 7 to 15 million with an 11 million target. And then finally, we have this propagandistic, hawkish slop called Valiant One. So the premise is that a, military, American Army or Marine or whatever, helicopter crashes in North Korea. And in order to avoid an international incident, they have to quickly move across, across the border to South Korea. And Laura Condor's in it. I saw the trailer for it when I was at some random other movie, and it kind of looked incredible because it looked so awful. Like, I was like, this actually would be like a really fun movie to go see, just for how like jingoistic it is. But again, this is not projected to open very big at all, only around 2 to 5 million, with a 3 million target. That's where I'm going to put it. So there's a very good chance this won't even make it into the top 10. Okay, so before moving on, I just want to give a quick plug to another YouTube channel I have called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between using these cartoon versions of myself. It's a lot of fun. It's the only video I have up right now just because I've just been so busy, but I'm hoping to kind of get back into it a little bit more, so really appreciate if you go check that out. I mean, you can find the link to that in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, let's talk about story number 1. So the nominations for the 97th Academy Awards have been announced. I'm not going to go through every single category and every single nominee, but I'm going to cover the Best Picture nominees. I'm going to run through kind of the scorecard of, like who got the most nominations between different films and different studios, and then kind of look at some highlights of interesting nominations as well as everyone's favorite pastime, the snubs. So for Best Picture, we have 10 nominees. Right? The Oscars used to be 5, and then they went to 10, and then they went to some weird ranked choice model where it would be anywhere from 5 to 10, and now they're just back to 10. Just a flat 10. So the Best Picture nominees are Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance, and Wicked. So interesting selection. This has been a year that every year I always try to see. Like last year was really cool because I had already seen all the Best Picture nominees by the time they were announced. This year I have a lot of blind spots actually, and I've just been so busy. And like if I was a good little boy, I would maybe after this show watch one of these movies or one of these other nominees in other categories. But I'm dubious that I will be able to get to that. So. Of course, films get multiple nominations in different categories. So here is a list of the films across all the categories that received 5 or more nominations. So Dune Part 2 got 5, as well as The Substance. They also got 5. Anora got 6. A Complete Unknown and Conclave got 8. The Brutalist got 10. The Wicked also got 10. And then the big kind of controversy, Emilia Perez with 13, which is... the record for most nominations is 14, right? So this is very, very high up, despite most people not liking it as a film and also finding it problematic when it comes to depicting the trans community, depicting Mexico, because it's like a French film that included like no Mexican crew members of any kind, from my understanding. So that's a little bit controversial, but we'll kind of put a pin in that. In terms of distributors with multiple nominations, so here are the distributors that received 10 or more nominations. Searchlight, which is formerly Fox Searchlight, so this is kind of Disney's indie film arm, if you will. They got 10 nominations. Focus Features got 12 nominations. Focus is Universal's indie arm. Speaking of Universal got 13 nominations. A24 got 14, and Netflix won the day with 16 nominations. Of course, 13 of which of those are coming from Emilia Perez. I forget where the other 3 are coming from. So again, the highlights here. Or nominations of note, if you will. Emilia Perez, like I said, 13. The record is 14, but this is still setting a record. So Emilia Perez sets the record for the most nominations for a non-English language film. I think there's English in it, but it's like predominantly, I guess, Spanish. I still have yet to see it, but, it's nominated for Best Picture. I will see it before the ceremony. But it does break this record. Most nominations for a non-English language film. This is surpassing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, as well as Roma. And they both got 10 nominations each. Another interesting turn of events here. Fernanda Torres getting nominated for Best Actress for her role in I'm Still Here. This is a foreign film. Usually you don't see... Well, it's becoming more common now. I shouldn't say you don't see it. It's really becoming more of a thing in like the last 5, but especially 10 years. It's rare to see a international film get so much love, especially in like the acting categories, right? Though she did win her respective Golden Globe for like her category earlier this month. So I guess this isn't a complete surprise that she would at least be nominated. So it's interesting to see if she'll get it, or if it'll be someone from like one of these bigger movies like Emilia Perez or Wicked. Also, a little exciting thing here, Isabella Rossellini. It's her first nomination for Best Supporting Actress in Conclave. She's been in the game for forever. She was on Succession, among many other things. I just found this out doing research for this. She's the daughter of Roberto Rossellini, the Italian filmmaker, and Ingrid Bergman, the Swedish actress, which I did not know. So she's filmmaking royalty, if not perhaps Hollywood royalty, right? Though I didn't find her particularly good in Conclave. I thought she was fine. So I think this is more of like a nomination for her body of work rather than like this specific performance. We also see Demi Moore getting her first nomination in Best Actress. Again, this was a really big moment at the Golden Globe. So it was Fernanda Torres in the drama category, and then like in the comedy category, which is such like a weird label that the Golden Globes puts on movies. Demi Moore won the Best Actress award, and it was such a big deal because for her, she felt like she had kind of been shut out of like that realm of the industry of like awards worthy filmmaking. On top of just the fact that award ceremonies are very usually don't like horror, especially horror like this. So the fact that she's been nominated, I know, is really, really exciting for people. If not for Demi Moore, then just for the horror genre and The Substance, because that's the movie she was in. The fact that that movie's getting recognized at all is really exciting. Similarly, the director of The Substance, Coralie Fargia, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I believe she's French, so I think it would be Fargia. I did take French in high school, so a little bit is like the synapses are going off. And she's only the 9th woman ever nominated in that category, which is really disappointing. But again, we're building out slowly but surely. We're kind of righting the wrongs of yesteryear. What was a real big surprise, and not because we didn't think people liked these performances, but because of the political climate right now, what was a big surprise was Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong getting nominated for their roles in The Apprentice as Donald Trump and Roy Cohn, respectively. The two of them, especially Sebastian Stan, had kind of been shut out of a lot of the awards season thus far. I believe Sebastian Stan won Best Actor at the Golden Globes, but for a different film, for a different man is the name of the movie. And I think the reason why they were kind of getting pushed to the side is because, again, in unlike Trump's first term, it seems like the media in Hollywood are trying like not to piss him off. So it was unclear if they would get recognition. But Sebastian Stan is really good as Trump. I wrote a review for Cinema QSO, the newsletter, which is where I write film reviews. You can find it in the description below. Little plug. I talked about how he brings an authenticity to the role without it feeling like caricature. Right? He really feels like Donald Trump in ways that like the SNL type impression doesn't quite capture, like the humanity of the guy. Not to absolve Trump, but more so just to make him a more interesting character to watch, right? Another couple notable things here. Yura Borisov, who a Russian actor from Anora, he got nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and this is notable because he's the first Russian actor to receive an acting nomination at the Oscars since 1977. Right, it's almost 50 years. So that's kind of cool. Timothy Chalamet, also setting a record here, or at least tying a record with James Dean for the youngest two-time Best Actor nominee. Of course, his first nomination was for Call Me By Your Name, and now he's nominated for his role as Bob Dylan in A Complete Unknown. But then the big, I think milestone here is Carla Sofia Gasson from Amelia Perez, pictured here to my right, your left, if you're watching. Carla Sofia Gasson getting nominated for Best Actress for Amelia Perez. And this is notable because she's the first openly trans actor to receive an acting nomination at the Oscars. Now, Elliot Page, you might be saying, what about Elliot Page for Juno? But he wasn't out yet. He wasn't openly trans yet. So this is really exciting that you have this, you have this milestone. And what's really going to ruffle people's feathers, of course, is because, if you're transphobic, then you're going to obviously throw your hands up and go, well, she's a he, and he's not an actress, he's an actor, and he shouldn't even be nominated, all of that notwithstanding. So this is just really cool and exciting for the trans community. And she even put out a statement saying, quote, "My character in the film is this ray of hope. And personally, I do feel like I am carrying this message. I have a social responsibility that goes beyond the creative achievement of the film. This is the type of movie that will make history, not just the cinema, but something that will be studied in books, that will be studied in universities," end quote. I think Carla's being a little, a little hyperbolic there, if I'm going to be honest. Again, if Amelia Perez is going to be talked about in history books, it's going to be in the breath of, here's like a list of 5 movies, the 5 movies that deserve the best picture win the least, right? And Amelia Perez seems like if it wins, which there's a non-zero chance it will, that it will be considered one of, if not the most egregious best picture decisions ever. And again, this is exciting for her, but again, it seems like the trans community doesn't really seem to like this film because it kind of is very sensationalized and kind of plays into a lot of negative and not so much negative but harmful tropes, right? Because the main premise is like this cartel leader, to escape getting killed by this rival cartel, decides to fulfill his lifelong dream of transitioning, and I believe that's Carla Sofia Gason's character. So it kind of creates this weird thing where, okay, we're reinforcing this idea that trans people are inherently deceitful, that it's some kind of deception, an active deception, if you will, right? But nevertheless, this is still really cool to see the first openly trans actor receiving a nomination. But of course, everyone's favorite part is the snubs, right? Who did not get any love from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences? So notably, in Best Director, we don't have any nominations for Edward Berger for Conclave, Denis Villeneuve of Dune Part 2, the second time now that he's been excluded for his Dune movies, or John Chu. Again, I think you're starting to see like a little bit of a decreased fervor for this movie. So poor John Chu. He's been shut out. We also did not get a nomination for Denzel Washington for Best Supporting Actor for his role in Gladiator 2. Nicole Kidman and Angelina Jolie were in conversation for Best Actress. Neither of them got a nomination. Kneecap, which is an Irish film, was Ireland's submission to the Academy Awards about a Irish language rap group. That seemed to be a very likely contender, but it did not get nominated for Best International Feature. And most disappointingly, Challengers did not get any nominations. And not even score. Which, like, even if you don't like the movie, the score is just incredible on its own. But then, like, just listening to it, like, it's just good on its own just listening to it, like, if you're working out or something. But then, like, in the film, it just takes what's already a great film and takes it to another level, right? So I guess, like, in summary here, this is one of the most, I'm trying to think, vague wouldn't be the word, but it's Deadline notes that the Best Picture race is wide open. It's not like, unlike last year, where it was clear, like, obviously there were other films that could have won, but it was very clear, like, if you were going to bet money, Oppenheimer would be the bet. Whereas here, they all are kind of feel a little more equally distributed in terms of their chances. Though there are, I would say, 3 frontrunners. Wicked, The Brutalist, and Amelia Perez. So, if it's between those 3, I would be vying for Wicked. I have not seen The Brutalist or Amelia Perez, but The Brutalist sounds like it's actually incredible. But again, Wicked, I think, just kind of it's like that perfect intersection of critical acclaim and popular support. But, we still, I was going to do like go through all the major categories and like who will win and who should win. But I figured it's not even worth it because, I'm really bad at making predictions. You know what I mean? I'm good at making like long-term predictions. I'm really bad at making short-term predictions. So, I'll leave the chips where they lay. But nevertheless, we now kind of have our sense of, who's going to take home the gold. It's going to be one of these people. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 2. So Ryan Gosling is in talks to star in Sean Levy's Star Wars movie. This was an exclusive from The Hollywood Reporter, and this is supposedly a late in the game decision for the movie. So reportedly Levy was going to direct a boy band movie for Paramount that was going to have Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman in it. But now that this casting is in the works, The Hollywood Reporter notes that this, if this goes through, if Gosling does sign on to this project, that it would expedite the film's production. That it would, because right now it's kind of like in this vague just development stage. There's a good chance it might go into production by like the end of this year, right? Like it would really just speed up the whole process. So Sean Levy, he's making a Star Wars movie, if you didn't know. So this began development when Levy finished his work directing Deadpool and Wolverine at the end of 2022. And I talked about this, I think I've talked about Levy on this channel before, that, he's an interesting case because he's an industry favorite, despite his movies being generally mediocre, right? But he keeps getting work, and I've always felt he must just have really good skills in the room of like talking to executives, of making them feel heard, and making them just being a personable guy. Because with his track record, even financially, it's not just like, oh, the movie suck, but they make a lot of money. Deadpool and Wolverine, I feel like, is the outlier. His movies typically, he's like behind Night at the Museum. I guess that made some money, but it helps that Deadpool and Wolverine was the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time, right? So of course everyone and their mother gets to do a Star Wars movie until it never happens, right? And again, we literally have zero detail. Like, this is like the first thing we've heard about this movie. The only thing we know is that it's meant to be like a standalone film. It's not a trilogy. It's not necessarily tied into pre-existing characters that we already know and have a relationship with, and we understand their backstory. It's meant to be its own thing. So a little bit about Ryan Gosling, as if you don't know who that is. I found out he's Canadian. I did not know, or at least he was born in Canada. He's in his mid-40s. He's in a very interesting filmography. It's very diverse, right? So he's done rom-coms, he's done dramas, he's done comedies, he's been in science fiction, he's been in thrillers. He's really run the gamut of different, musicals, if you want to count La La Land. Like, he's really done everything under the sun. His star power has always been there, but I would say he's probably as popular now as he's been since he first came on the scene. I would say really like with The Notebook, kind of being like a heartthrob, if you will, right? He's really popular now because, his role in Greta Gerwig's Barbie from last year was a big pop culture phenomenon, right? The Ken song, all the memes. So his star is burning pretty bright right now, which is good if you're part of the Gosling, team, if you will, right? And the Hollywood Reporter does note, though, that this would be a rare instance where Star Wars cast a major movie star. Now, that being said, they've casted big names before, but typically they are almost always they serve in almost like support or mentor roles. So if you think like the original trilogy, it's like all unknown actors, but then you have like Alec Guinness and you have Peter Cushing, and then the prequels you have like Liam Neeson and Sam Jackson, but they're like not like the main focus really. And spoiler alert, Liam Neeson gets killed off in the first movie, right? Where I guess Gosling could be that, but most likely you would think that he would be like a, like it seems like he would be best suited for like a non-Force character. Like he had kind of, especially from what we've seen from him as of late, he kind of has this sardonic charm that fits like a Han Solo type, like some kind of smuggler or bounty hunter or something like that. And notably, all the things I mentioned before, those were big names, but they weren't movie stars in the way that Ryan Gosling you could consider him a movie star, right? Like Liam Neeson was not on really many magazine covers, the way that Ryan Gosling is, and this would be very different for Star Wars. Not necessarily better or worse, but just different, right? Just something we haven't really seen before. Though the big question is, will this movie even get made, right? So I've done a couple videos on the channel about different Star Wars projects getting announced and canceled, and I always did the obligatory, let me read you all the Star Wars announcements of announced Star Wars films that have yet to come out. I chose not to do that this time just because the list is laboriously long. But again, the fact that this has potential casting, because again, this isn't confirmed, they're in talks, but the fact that this is even in the conversation and it's breaking to the public really helps its chances immensely, right? Because I think about all of these projects that are still in limbo, or they were announced then got canceled. I don't know if they ever got as far as cast rumors. So that really does bode well for the chances of this thing actually getting made. And again, that detail from Hollywood Reporter seems encouraging. And I'll read you this little blurb from the article. Quote, Gosling's interest and involvement suddenly shifted the Star Wars project into hyperspace. If a deal makes, the project will continue to fly like the Millennium Falcon, becoming not only Levy's next movie, but also the next Star Wars movie to go in production, with cameras potentially rolling this fall, end quote. So again, this went from being a nebulous in development kind of thing to the point where we might see they might start, shooting this thing in the next 9 months or something, right? So, again, with all of these, I'll believe it when I see it. And again, I'm not like the biggest Ryan Gosling fan. I've always liked him and everything, but as just like an independent observer, this really does, make this film's existence a little more likely. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Actually, before I do that, another plug. I want to plug the podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We just started our season on Middle Earth, like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, all that stuff. It's already so fun to kind of dive into these movies I haven't seen like a million times. Unlike Star Wars, which was our previous season, which I've seen like a bajillion times. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us down in the description below. Okay, now let's get to story number 3. Let me grab another quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 3. So Paramount Global has received a new $13.5 billion offer. This is coming from a consortium of investors called Project Rise Partners. It's mostly an anonymous group of individuals. There's like 2 people we do know are involved, but I didn't recognize them by name, and I figured if I didn't, you guys certainly won't. But you can, that's all in you can find that. If you're watching this as its own video, you can find the sources down below. But Variety notes that sources told them that the group does include one of the richest men in the world. So who that could be is anyone's guess. Maybe an Elon Musk of some kind, right? And they claimed that they had made an earlier all-cash bid during the Go Shop period that Paramount had with Skydance. So this materialized because this Project Rise partner sent a legal letter to Paramount's board last Friday, claiming that this offer and their terms are vastly superior to the Skydance deal that they're currently entangled with. So again, the context of this, I'm not going to get super into this. I've done a gajillion videos about this on my channel, during the spring and summer and fall of last year. It felt like every week I was talking about this, but essentially the long story short, Paramount Global, owned by National Amusements, which was controlled by Sherry Redstone and the Redstone family, they were looking to sell. And a lot of different potential buyers, emerged. And Skydance Media, run by David Ellison, son of Larry Ellison, the tech mogul behind Oracle, Skydance was the most interested. They seemed to really want, because for them, Skydance, this would be a level up, right? Merging with and acquiring one of the legacy Hollywood movie studios would be very validating for David Ellison. The issue, though, was that investors felt that the deal that Skydance proposed disproportionately benefited Sherry Redstone. And there was talk of shareholder revolt and even lawsuits about this. So they entertained other offers. At one point, Sony was really in the mix, and then that kind of subsided. And it seemed like the deal wouldn't happen. But finally, I think it was like July, they finally worked out details. of the term of the deal, and it seemed like, okay, assuming they're able to get through regulatory processes, this is the future of Paramount, a kind of new Paramount, if you will. But now we have a new offer. So here are the terms, more or less, of this offer. So I have a quote here from the legal letter that they sent, saying, quote, "In light of the market's negative reaction to the Skydance transaction, PRP," which is the group, "is now increasing its offer as follows. The offer for the B shares is $19 per share compared to $15 per share in the Skydance offer, a 75% premium and 27% more than Skydance. The PRP offer for the A shares remains the same as the Skydance offer. PRP will add $2 billion to the balance sheet. This is an all-cash offer with committed financing from credible investors," end quote. So the long and short of it is they're saying, look, we're going to give you, because basically the long and short of it, Class A and Class B shareholders is a way to divide up different kinds of shareholders in the company. And, Type A, the A shares, they have a lot more control and voting rights than the B shares. So it was really the people with the B shares that were really complaining about the Skydance deal. So basically what PRP here is saying is, look, those of you with the A shares, you're going to basically get the same exact thing. But we're also going to increase, we're going to make it better for the Class B. So no one is losing anything. The only person who would lose is Skydance. In addition to this, Class B shareholders would, quote, own 50% of the equity versus 30% in the Skydance offer. The PRP offer includes an independent board and normal corporate governance. The board committees that Skydance plans to eliminate would be retained. B shareholders would receive a vote for the first time in the company's history, end quote. So they're really positioning this as, they're really positioning this as a way to, help Paramount shield itself from critique and, again, possibly lawsuits from any Class B shareholders, leveling claims against Sherry Redstone that she's not fulfilling her fiduciary duty, which is, of course, to increase shareholder value, not necessarily just increase her own shareholder value. Lorenzo puts in the comments a bid that was submitted 3 months ago. I'm not sure what you're referring to. At least this new offer was literally this last week. Though, again, supposedly they did make an offer during the Go Shop period, because part of the Skydance deal was, they had 45 days or whatever it was to look at other offers after they basically signed the deal with Skydance. Nothing really meaningful, according to Paramount, nothing really meaningful materialized, so they went ahead with the Skydance deal. And then on top of this, another thing that they are kind of highlighting here in their offer is that, unlike the Skydance deal, which would have a lot of synergistic efficiency, i.e. job cuts and layoffs, this offer, supposedly, the idea is that they would grow the staff rather than make cuts. I see, Lorenzo, here you say, and now the offer that has now been rejected. Yeah, so here's the thing. Like today, or maybe yesterday, I didn't have time to put it in my notes, but Paramount basically said, the board basically said, we're not even considering this. We're locked in with Skydance. It's not happening. And I was like, shit, should I scrap this story? Should I do a last minute change or something else? But I decided to still do this story for two reasons. Number one, I don't think it's as clean cut as this. Again, this deal, has everything the other deal has, but more. And I think, and both the Variety article that kind of went through all of this, as well as I think the legal letter itself kind of alluded to the fact that, legally, again, as a fiduciary, you have an obligation to seriously consider this offer. Because this could potentially be better for your shareholders. So I don't know, because again, nothing is illegal unless it's enforced. So, they could very well not consider the deal, but then the question will become, I think there's a non-zero chance someone will sue and say, you need to look at this deal. You need to maybe, make this a viable option for us. So frankly, even if they say they rejected it, again, the amount of back and forth, during the whole initial saga leads me to believe that, I can't just summarily say, oh yeah, they've rejected it. Okay, that's the end of it. I think it could still develop. But even if that's true, and this is the second reason why I kept the story in for this week, is the fact that this deal, this Skydance deal was essentially, worked out half a year ago, and people are still throwing their hat in the ring, speaks to I don't want to say the value of Paramount, but the hunger to get your hands on it. Because, I've talked about this before. Paramount has all the makings of being a really, really successful company. At least compared to its peers, right? It has strong franchises with, Mission Impossible and Transformers, and then of course all the Nickelodeon stuff like SpongeBob. But the issue has just been management. They just don't know what to do with this stuff. So, anyone who knows anything about investment will tell you, you don't want to buy the best thing. You want to buy the thing that is undervalued. Because the idea is that you'll buy into it when it's cheaper, and then it'll grow in value, and then you'll sell your stake, right? This is not financial advice, but I've actually made a little interesting long-term investment of basically every week investing like $1 into Paramount, right? Because my thinking is it can't get any worse. So, my thinking is that it's all upside, that it's gonna go up. Again, long term, maybe not within the next 6 months, but, the next 5 years, I think it's gonna grow. But again, this just shows, nevertheless, that the saga continues, right? The shareholders, like I said, never liked the Skydance deal, and they eventually kind of gave up fighting, and not because it was modified in a way that satisfied them. I think they just kind of threw their hands up from exhaustion, just went, fine, whatever, right? So again, could an offer like this change the tide? Like I said, Variety notes that a public company like this has an obligation legally to consider any legitimate offer. So to publicly and summarily say, we're not even going to look at this, that might create some trouble for them. Though that being said, financially, this deal is probably better, but it's probably better for the actual strength of the company if the Skydance deal goes through. And the reason why is like what I said before, that I think the issue has been management and the business style. And, David Ellison, you can call him a Nepo baby, whatever you want. He's been a very successful producer, right? They have a proven track record with content. I'm not saying he's some kind of avant-garde auteur, but, he's not just like a suit. He clearly has an understanding of content, what people like. And that's what Paramount needs the most help with right now, right? Whereas if this consortium of investors steps in, it would just be changing the ownership. It wouldn't be changing the core fundamentals, as opposed to like a full-on merger with another film studio, right? I don't have sources on this because I read it and kind of went, that's interesting, but I didn't like write it down. So feel free to do your own research and let me know in the comments. But I'm pretty sure I read, like I said, Variety says a source said that the group includes one of the richest men in the world. I joked earlier, like maybe that's Elon Musk. I think there's a good chance it's Elon Musk because I guess there's some tension between Musk and Larry Ellison over, just like personal beef and professional, competition. So I could see Elon Musk, helping, basically as an FU to Larry Ellison, right? The father of David Ellison. So, just the fact that there are people who still want Paramount, even though it's like, everyone wanted to go out with this girl, and then she finally goes out with someone, and she's like about to get married, and then someone's still like, being like, hey, do you want to go out for a drink? Do you want to go? Like, the fact that people are still trying to get in on it speaks to potentially, the untapped value, at least that they see an untapped value. So as much as I want this to be over, the Paramount Skydance saga continues, and I think will continue. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 4. So Justin Baldoni has released a series of video. Well, it's really one video, but it's a compilation of takes that from the production of the It Ends With Us film. And he's releasing this footage of these different takes of the scene to corroborate his side of the feud that he has ongoing now with Blake Lively. So again, I've done a lot of videos on this so far. I'm sure I'll do even more videos, but again, just a brief overview of the context of this feud. Blake Lively was in the film adaptation of the book It Ends With Us. Justin Baldoni was the director and her co-star. And Lively accused Baldoni of sexual harassment and then also accused him of conducting a smear campaign against her in the court of public opinion. This was primarily substantiated by a New York Times article that showed text exchanges between different publicists that were working for Baldoni about different stories about Blake Lively in the press. Excuse me. Baldoni then sued the New York Times for libel. And then in response, Lively officially sued him for sexual harassment, because before it was mostly just confidential accusations. And then he has now countersued her for a myriad of offenses, including libel and breach of contract and all these different things. So this is like the next, the next wrinkle into the story. So the details of this video, it's 10 minutes long. It shows 3 takes of this slow motion sequence from the film. Baldoni's team says that these were the only takes of the moment. So there's not like other secret footage, supposedly, according to them, that would contradict his argument here. And by just watching the video on a surface level, it seems to be a pretty benign encounter. There's an exchange. Baldoni says to her, they're kind of nuzzling each other. It's kind of a romantic scene. Baldoni says to her, quote, "Am I getting beard on you today?" End quote. Lively says, "I'm probably getting spray tan on you." And Baldoni says, "It smells good." There's a title card at the beginning of this video that says, quote, "Both actors are clearly behaving well within the scope of the scene and with mutual respect and professionalism," end quote. So basically their argument is that it contradicts one of Lively's claims, right? One of the claims she makes is when they were filming the scene that he, quote, "leaned forward and slowly dragged his lips from her ear and down her neck as he said, quote, 'It smells so good,' end quote." Now, I don't want to pass judgment right now, but the video doesn't seem like, saying "it smells so good" versus "it smells good." There's a difference. You know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily, it feels like a little bit of a mischaracterization there. Though you would think, okay, we have video evidence, so this must settle it. It's really a Rorschach test, right? And you see in it what you want to see in it. And that's not throwing shade. Again, I think if you've watched my videos on this is a very complicated situation where I think both sides are kind of right about their claims. And it's, kind of I'm not trying to equivocate, but anyway, so Lively's team argues that the video actually validates their arguments, saying, quote, "Any woman who has been inappropriately touched in the workplace will recognize Miss Lively's discomfort. They will recognize her attempts at levity to try to deflect the unwanted touching. No woman should have to take defensive measures to avoid being touched by their employer without their consent," end quote. And that's a very, very good point, right? Like, just because she's not going, "Oh, stop it!" Like she shouldn't have to do that. And oftentimes, I say this if I'm not a woman, right? So, feel free to, add texture to the analysis in the comments. But, I think a lot of times it's like, as a woman, you have to pick and choose your battles. And it's kind of like, you're just going to play off a lot of stuff just because it's like not worth it to get into a whole thing, right? So that's an interesting kind of analysis here. And we also got an analysis from an intimacy coordinator named Mia Schachter, who spoke with the Hollywood Reporter reviewing the video. And her analysis is, quote, "He is trying to kiss her and they clearly haven't discussed that ahead of time. And she keeps pulling away and clearly doesn't want to do that. Even though she's Blake Lively and can say no and isn't going to be fired for speaking her mind the way that somebody else might fear, she still has to keep working with him and keep the peace and play nice." Like I was saying earlier, I can just see her trying to stay lighthearted and in good spirits about it and not upset him or anybody and not waste anybody's time. But of course, she is trapped between a rock and a hard place. I can see her appeasing him and trying to keep a smile on her face, end quote. So again, that's another interesting analysis here, that this idea of, that that, spontaneity, a lot of actors will be like kind of dismiss the idea of intimacy coordinators being like, oh, well, it, ruins the authenticity and the spontaneity of a scene. And it's like, that'd be like arguing like, oh, like we shouldn't have fight choreography. We should just like throw hands because, oh, that's more spontaneous and authentic. It's like, no, you need to plan, you need to like kind of script out those things and choreograph those moments. And physical intimacy, even if it's just kissing, is the same ballpark. So it's interesting. Again, this video, it kind of, people will take from this video what they want to take from it, right? So all of this to say the feud, if it wasn't already, it's just quickly becoming this media circus. It's this back and forth in the press. It's Baldoni accusing Ryan Reynolds of basing Nice Pool off of Baldoni as a way to mock him. It's just getting more and more ridiculous week after week. And Lively's team even acknowledged this point, saying, quote, "This matter is in active litigation in federal court. Releasing this video to the media rather than presenting it as evidence in court is another example of an unethical attempt to manipulate the public," end quote. And I believe Lively's team is trying to get, a gag order placed on Baldoni, which essentially, if you don't know what that is, basically a court order to stop someone from publicly discussing an ongoing trial or case, right? Because they're just like, even if it's not true, like, we're gonna get screwed. Again, this is a war in the court of public opinion, right? Both of their reputations are on the line. And arguably, Justin Baldoni's already suffered, right? He's been dropped by his talent agency, Again, this isn't to say, oh, boo-hoo, because again, I'm hesitant to weigh in on who's right and who's wrong. Because again, I was not there. I don't know the truth. And like I said, I feel like there's probably truth to both sides here. And I'm not trying to do both sidesism. And usually when people are saying like, oh, the truth's in the middle, usually they're just trying to equivocate the side that is the person in the wrong. In this case, I mean, like, no, it seems like they're both right about the other person not being great to work with, right? But, just statistically speaking, I don't care if this makes me woke, I don't care. I'm more inclined to believe the woman in this situation because just statistically, there's going to be power imbalances working against women than against men, unfortunately, right? So, I think we gotta, take all of this with a grain of salt. And I'm really excited. Excited's the wrong word, but I think, seeing this actually go to a trial will be interesting because, you're not just like releasing videos and hoping you can sway people. Like, you have to actually have evidence and like make an actual argument. But again, I would not be, every week I feel like for the past couple of weeks I've had a story about this, and I anticipate a lot more going forward. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. And we have a late comment here from Rodrigo Odin Salzeda Cisneros. Apologize for the mispronunciation. Looks like they're watching early in the live stream. So if you got to this point, Rodrigo, I'm responding to your comment now, saying Joker 2 is a kitsch musical very similar to Amelia Perez. Yeah, like, that's another thing is, like, maybe Amelia Perez is, like, meant to be not good. Like maybe it's meant to just be like hyper stylized. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I will be seeing it, but Joker 2 is an interesting comparison. Another movie that people did not really like all that much. Okay, let's talk about story number 5 here. So The Brutalist, Oscar-nominated film starring Adrian Brody, directed by Brady Corbet. The film is facing backlash after its editor David Jonkso. I could be mispronouncing it. He's Hungarian. The film's facing backlash after Jonkso revealed that the film used artificial intelligence. So specifically, it was for tools used to improve the Hungarian dialogue of Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones, who star in the film, who are of course not Hungarian, nor are native Hungarian speakers. And Jonkso said, quote, in this interview, quote, I am a native Hungarian speaker, and I know that it is one of the most difficult languages to learn to pronounce. It is an extremely unique language. We coached Brody and Jones, and they did a fabulous job, but we wanted to perfect it so that not even locals will spot any difference, end quote. It seems like, it was pretty close, but again, Hungarian is just so idiosyncratic. They tried ADR at first, having the actors come in, in a studio after filming to try to redo the lines in a more controlled environment. That didn't quite, do the job. So then they tried getting voice doubles to come do the lines. That didn't really work either. So what they did is that the actors recorded their voices into an AI software. These tools were from a Ukrainian company called Respeecher. This was the same company that worked with Disney on the Obi-Wan show to recreate James Earl Jones' voice for that miniseries. And Jonkso, in addition to the actors themselves feeding their voice in, Jonkso says that he fed his voice in as well to, quote, finesse the tricky dialogue, end quote. And he goes on further saying, quote, most of their Hungarian dialogue has a part of me talking in there. We were very careful about keeping their performances. It's mainly just replacing letters here and there, end quote. Which seems fine enough. It was also revealed, almost as a footnote to this article, that it was revealed that generative AI was used in final sequences in the film to create these architectural drawings and finished building in the style of Adrian Brody's character, who of course is an architect. And of course, this has been getting a very negative reaction from people, especially considering the film is kind of being touted as almost like the successor to Oppenheimer, like this big, epic movie about something that isn't particularly exciting on its face. And, it's really cinematic and authentic. It celebrates the fundamentals of filmmaking. It's not this phony shit. So to hear that it employed AI in any capacity, people were upset and kind of felt like this was, a ruse, if you will. Frankly, I think this is an overreaction. So I've talked about this on the channel plenty of times, but ultimately AI is just a tool like any other. There's 8 different things you can talk about AI in terms of potential problems. And I feel like they all have to be addressed individually, right? Because AI, potentially is going to replace jobs, but that's very different than artistic authenticity. Those are 2 separate concerns. Looking just at these concerns, let me put it this way. People, well, actually, before I put it this way, I'm going to put it another different way. Full stop. I'm not going to ever, human creatives and human artists will always be better than any generative AI system because, by definition, generative AI is recycling, content. And of course, we do the same thing, but it's filtered through our souls. Our souls are like a prism. So we take inspiration, but then we create. It's like baking a cake, a chemical reaction. Once you've baked it, it becomes something new, right? When you have a cake, you can't go, oh, well, there's the wheat, and over here's the eggs. It just kind of becomes this new thing. And I'm not someone who thinks that AI, films are going to replace real films or this, that, the other thing. And again, because of that lack of the human touch, the human soul, and people complain that, a lot of AR art that people try to pass off as being just as good, if not better than real art, quote unquote, people will say it's soulless. But here's the rub. Most creators and more importantly, most consumers don't care about soul, right? Take practical effects, for example, versus CGI. Practical effects are always going to be better and look better than computer-generated imagery. But most people don't care enough for that to matter. You know what I'm saying? That the difference in cost or effort is not worth the extra appreciation. That for most people, they don't care, right? And I'll give you an example, full stop. And I'll be fully transparent about this. My titles for my YouTube videos, the descriptions, are all AI generated. I put in the outline and say, write a SEO-friendly title, give me 5 options, have the structure like this, and this spits out options, and then I pick one, and if I don't like any of them, I kind of finesse it and play around with it. Because it's not worth, it's that a YouTube video title is not this intensely personal creative work. It's something to be there for the algorithm to know how to flag the video to put it in front of different people, right? So it doesn't need to be artful. There are certain things that AI is really good at, and that's one of them. Because ultimately, like people talk about like social media copy, like if you're like in marketing or advertising, like it's already soulless anyway. We may as well use the AI to make the process quicker and more efficient, not to replace jobs, but to make the jobs of people like to make the work of the people who already have those jobs easier, and they can devote that time to actually valuable things that only a human can do, right? Again, because most consumers, audiences, viewers, whatever you want to say, most people just care about the final result. They care more about that than the process in which it was made, right? Like, if you're watching a movie and you're like, he did his own stunts, most people will be like, okay. Like, that doesn't matter to people. What they care about is what I'm seeing enjoyable, because most people are shallow and vapid, right? Like, and it's not necessarily a critique. It's just that, a lot of these arguments, if you apply the same argument to like literally anything else, you would sound insane and be like, oh, but like, we can't have factories make chairs because we'll lose the artisanal, quality and character of a craftsman making an individual chair. That's all true. But most people don't give a shit. They just want a chair, right? Like, and that's my point. And I don't think AI will or should or could replace actual art. But what you'll see is that you'll see, people using the technology for something like this, so it can free them up to focus on other stuff, the actual human part. Specifically the accent thing, I think is not only acceptable, I think it's a net positive, right? Because accents, if you're an actor playing a character with an accent different than yours, it's having to learn it is a necessary evil. I'm not an actor. I have acted, but I'm not like a professional actor. But I don't know, so if you are, feel free to let me know. I don't feel like having to learn that accent is really making your performance that much better. I think it's just something you have to do. And that's time you could be spending doing other stuff related to developing your character. So if people were able to, if actors did not have to worry about trying to nail an accent, the technology would allow more actors to explore different kinds of characters. Brady Corbett, who's the director of this, said, quote, "The aim was to preserve the authenticity of Adrian Felicity's performances in another language, not to replace or alter them," end quote. And that's kind of my point. And I think one of the cool things you're going to see, and again, people will go, oh, but the people who do the dubbing voice will lose their jobs. Like, that's really bad. Full stop. Right? I'm no asterisks on that. But is that really like an essential part of the authenticity, or is it just a necessary evil? Because what you could start seeing is dubbing done with AI, where it's basically taking the actor's voice, the actual actor's voice, and putting it into a different language so it has the same kind of personality to it, and using AI and CGI to change the mouth so it looks like they're actually saying that foreign language. That would help a lot of, we shouldn't have to do this. I prefer subs over dubs, but if people want dubs, that might be a really interesting way to do it. That preserves the authenticity of the original performance. The editor Jonkso said, quote, "We should be having a very open discussion about what tools AI can provide us with. There's nothing in the film using AI that hasn't been done before. It just makes the process a lot faster. We use AI to create these tiny little details that we didn't have the money or the time to shoot," end quote. And that's more of a comment related to like the visual generative AI. That I'm a little more skeptical of, because that's just like a whole ass thing that you would have hired someone to do, that now you just like optimized someone's job away. But again, the accent thing, I'm really annoyed at people being annoyed by it. Again, at the end of the day, the technology still requires prompting by a human. So in some way, however, backwards you want to call. Obviously, this is not a blanket statement because all different. It's really case by case depending on the use of the AI and the work itself and how much and what the person put into it in terms of the prompting. But at the end of the day, there's still a human involved in the process. It's not an autonomous computer just going off and it has to be prompted. And if nothing else, the creative shepherding, if you will, is in the prompting. So, what's going to happen is that, people, it's not about, because most AI art sucks, but what's going to happen is you're going to have people who know how to use the prompts and how to word things to get exactly what they want, which will be a skill in of itself. It won't be necessarily the same kind of skill, but it will be a skill. So, I think everyone's kind of setting their hair on fire over this. I think of all of the AI things that we could be talking about, I feel like this is like a nothing burger, frankly. Okay, so that wraps up the show. Just want to give one final plug. I have a Cinnamon QSO is not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I cover, where I write written reviews for new movies coming out. It's been a lot of fun. I've been doing it for about 3 years now. I have over 100 reviews up. It would really mean a lot if you could go check that out. You can find the link in the description below, or you can just find, you can just go to your browser, type in cinnamonqso.substack.com. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't already, please like this video. It really, really, really helps with engagement and the algorithm so more people can find the channel. So if you have stumbled upon this channel, why not subscribe? So that way you get notifications about my live streams and other videos that I upload, and you never miss a show. So with no further ado, thank you all again for watching. Until next time, peace out. If I can find the button.